The moving truck pulled away from our driveway, leaving behind tire marks on the asphalt and the ghost of a marriage that had lasted 12 years. I stood at the kitchen window, watching my husband Marcus load the last of his belongings into his silver BMW. Beside him, perfectly manicured and glowing with victory, stood Victoria Chen, his assistant, his lover, and now his new live-in girlfriend. What Marcus didn't expect was my smile. What he couldn't have predicted was how I calmly handed him the spare keys, wished them both well, and meant every word. Because this time, I knew something he didn't. This time, I remembered everything. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The first time I lived this moment, I had fallen to my knees in this very kitchen. I had begged, screamed, and thrown myself at his feet like a woman possessed. The humiliation had been complete when Victoria stepped over me to reach for the coffee maker. My coffee maker, with the casual indifference of someone claiming territory that was already hers, but that was 3 months ago. Before the accident, before I woke up in Seattle General with machines beeping around me and Marcus holding my hand with tears in his eyes, swearing he'd changed, that he'd chosen me. Before I lived through 6 weeks of false hope, watching him pretend to be the devoted husband while secretly planning his exit strategy. Now, standing in the same kitchen where my world had shattered, I felt nothing but profound relief. The weight of trying to save a marriage that had died years ago was finally off my shoulders. "Are you sure about this, Elena?" my sister Carmen asked from behind me. She'd driven over the moment she got my text, expecting to find me in pieces. Instead, she found me organizing the spice rack with military precision. "More sure than I've ever been about anything," I replied, not turning around. Through the window, I watched Marcus struggle with a box that was clearly too heavy for him. In my previous life, I would have rushed out to help him. This time, I continued alphabetizing the oregano and paprika. Carmen moved to stand beside me, her reflection joining mine in the glass. "You know people are going to talk. The whole firm is going to have opinions about the law firm. Harrison, Walsh and Associates, where Marcus and I had met 15 years ago, where he was now a senior partner and I was the head of family law. A cruel irony that wasn't lost on me. Where Victoria had started as an intern 3 years ago, fresh out of college with ambition in her eyes and a talent for making powerful men feel important. "Let them talk," I said, finally turning to face my sister. "I'm done caring about what other people think I should feel." Carmen studied my face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "You're different. I mean, I expected you to be devastated, but you're calm, almost peaceful. If only anyone could understand what it felt like to live through your worst nightmare, and then wake up with the power to change everything, not through magic or miracles, but through the simple act of choosing differently." The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, holding a casserole dish, her face arranged in the practiced expression of someone delivering condolences. Word traveled fast in our suburban neighborhood. "Elena, dear," she said when I opened the door. "I heard about Marcus. I'm so sorry. I brought you some tuna casserole." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. But I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine." Her eyebrows shot up. "Well, that's good, I suppose. You know, when Harold left me, that was 20 years ago now, I was a mess for months. Couldn't get out of bed, couldn't eat. The church ladies had to take shifts checking on me." "I remember," I said gently. "But this isn't like that. This is more like freedom." She blinked several times, clearly not computing my response. "Oh, well, the casserole will keep in the freezer if you change your mind." After she left, I found Carmen in the living room, staring at the empty spaces where Marcus's belongings used to be. The leather recliner was gone, leaving an indentation in the carpet. His collection of vintage whiskey bottles had vanished from the mantel, along with his golf trophies and the wedding photo where we both looked so young and hopeful. "Remember when you two first moved in here?" Carmen asked. "You were so excited about having your own place. You spent weeks picking out every piece of furniture, every paint color." I did remember. I also remembered how, Over the years, Marcus had gradually replaced my choices with his own. The cheerful yellow walls had become neutral beige. My grandmother's china cabinet had been moved to the basement to make room for his entertainment center. Piece by piece, the house had become his space, with me as merely a guest in my own home. "I'm going to redecorate," I announced, starting with the living room. "I want color again. Real color." Carmen smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from her all day. "Now that sounds like the Alina I used to know." My phone buzzed with a text message. "Marcus, I forgot my charger in the nightstand. Can I come get it?" The old Alina would have driven it to him immediately, probably with a bag of his favorite snacks and a hopeful smile. The new Alina typed back, "I'll leave it on the front porch." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Finally, we need to talk about the house, and the finances, and other things. My lawyer will be in touch," I replied, then turned off my phone. "Was that him?" Carmen asked, trying to maintain control. "He's probably panicking right now, wondering why I'm not falling apart." "Are you going to tell me what really happened here? Because this Zen thing you've got going on doesn't match the Alina who called me sobbing 3 months ago." I sat down on the couch, pulling my knees up to my chest. How could I explain that I'd already lived through the worst of it, that I'd spent weeks in therapy, months in a depression so deep I'd barely been able to function, and eventually found my way to a kind of peace that only comes from accepting the unacceptable? "I realized something," I said instead. "All this time I thought I was fighting for our marriage, but I was actually fighting to keep something that was already dead. Marcus checked out of this relationship years ago. I was just too afraid to admit it." Carmen sat beside me, her hand finding mine. "What changed?" "I stopped being afraid," I said simply. "I stopped being afraid of being alone, of what people would think, of starting over at 35. I realized that anything, literally anything, was better than staying in a marriage where I was invisible." Through the window, I watched Marcus's car disappear around the corner. In my previous life, I had stood at this same window and cried until my eyes were swollen shut. I had called him 17 times that first night, begging him to come home. I had driven past Victoria's apartment building at 2 a.m., sitting in my car like a stalker, imagining them together. This time I felt nothing but quiet satisfaction. Let him go. Let him discover what I had learned in those awful months after he left. That running away from your problems doesn't solve them. That betraying someone who loved you completely leaves a mark on your soul that never fully heals. Victoria Chen might be younger and prettier, but she was also ambitious enough to trade sex for career advancement, which meant she was already calculating her next move. "I need to ask you something," Carmen said carefully. "Are you planning to fight for the house?" I looked around the room, seeing it with new eyes. The crown molding Marcus had insisted on, the hardwood floors I'd wanted to carpet, the massive stone fireplace that dominated the space but had never actually been used. "No," I said. "Let him have it. I want something smaller. Something that's actually mine." Carmen's mouth fell open. "Alina, this house is worth $800,000. Your name is on the deed. You can't just—" "I can do whatever I want," I interrupted. "That's the point. For the first time in 12 years, I get to make decisions based on what I want, not what will make Marcus happy or what will keep the peace or what looks good to the neighbors." My sister stared at me for a long moment. "You're scaring me a little. This isn't like—" "Good," I said, standing up and walking to the window. Because the old me walked on for 12 years. The old me made excuses for a man who was screwing his assistant in hotel rooms while I was home cooking his dinner. The old me thought love meant sacrificing everything for someone who wouldn't sacrifice anything for me. Outside, the street was quiet. Children's bicycles lay abandoned on front lawns. Porch lights were beginning to flicker on as the sun set behind the tree. It was the kind of peaceful suburban evening that had once represented everything I wanted from life. Now it felt like a stage set for someone else's story. "I'm going to start over," I said, my breath fogging the glass. "Completely. New house, new life, new everything." "What about the firm?" That was the question I'd been dreading. Harrison Walsh and Associates wasn't just my job. It was my career, my reputation, my entire professional identity. But it was also where Marcus worked, where Victoria worked, where I would have to face the whispers and pitying looks, and carefully neutral expressions of colleagues, who had watched my marriage implode in real time. I don't know yet, I admitted. I need to think about it. What I didn't tell Carmen was that in my previous life, I'd stayed at the firm for 6 months after the separation. 6 months of watching Marcus and Victoria's relationship bloom from the shadows, of pretending to be professional while my heart was breaking, of becoming the office cautionary tale about what happens when you mix business with pleasure. I wouldn't put myself through that again. I could. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. My phone rang, vibrating against the coffee table. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I felt the old familiar flutter of hope. Maybe he'd realized his mistake. Maybe he was calling to apologize, to come home, to fight for us. Then I remembered Victoria's smug smile as she walked through my front door like she owned the place. I remembered the way Marcus had looked at her, the way he used to look at me. I remembered that some things, once broken, can never be fixed. I let the call go to voicemail. The voicemail message played while I made myself a cup of tea. Earl Grey, not the French roast Marcus preferred. His voice sounded strained, uncertain. "Elena, we really need to discuss the logistics of this. The mortgage, the car payments, my retirement account. Look, I know this is hard, but we need to be adults about it. Call me back." Adults. That was rich, coming from a man who'd been sneaking around like a teenager for 8 months. I deleted the message and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Jennifer Walsh speaking. "Jennifer, it's Elena Rodriguez. I need to schedule an appointment as a client, not a colleague." There was a pause. Jennifer Walsh was one of the founding partners at our firm, and the best divorce attorney in the state. She was also Marcus's boss, which made this conversation particularly delicate. "Elena, I think you should reconsider the optics of this." "I don't care about optics anymore," I said, surprising myself with how firm my voice sounded. "Can you see me tomorrow morning?" Another pause. 9 a.m. "And Elena?" "Come prepared to discuss everything. It's sets, debts, the work." After hanging up, I walked through the house, really seeing it for the first time in years. The crown molding Marcus had insisted on installing despite the cost. The kitchen island took up too much space but impressed dinner guests. The master bedroom with its king-sized bed that had felt like an ocean between us for the past 2 years. In my previous life, I'd clung to these material things like they were lifeline. The house, the cars, the joint bank accounts, they'd represented security, stability, proof that we'd built something together. Now I could see them for what they really were. Gilded chains. My laptop was still open on the kitchen counter, showing my work E43 unread messages, most of them case updates and client communications, but buried among them was one that made my stomach clench. Subject: team building event. RSVP required. From Victoria Chen. I opened it against my better judgment. Victoria had been promoted to office manager 3 weeks ago, a position that had been created specifically for her, with a salary that probably exceeded what most associates made. The email was about a company retreat to Lake Tahoe, complete with team-building exercises and bonding activity. The old Elena would have agonized over whether to attend, worried about appearances, afraid of being seen as bitter or unprofessional. The new Elena hit delete and started drafting her own email. "To whom it may concern," I typed. "Please accept this as my formal notice of resignation from Harrison, Walsh & Associates. My last day will be Friday, October 15th. I will ensure all case files are properly transferred and client communications are handled appropriately during the transition period." I stared at the words for a long moment before hitting send. There. Done. No explanation, no emotional appeals, no burning bridges, just a clean, professional exit from a chapter of my life that was already over. My phone rang almost immediately. Richard Harrison's name flashed on the screen. "Elena, what the hell is this email about? You can't just quit without notice. I just gave you 3 weeks notice. That's more than professional courtesy requires. You're one of our best attorneys. The Pemberton case alone will be handled just fine by someone else. I've already started documenting everything for the transition. Richard's voice took on the paternal tone he used when he thought he was being persuasive. Look, I know this situation with Marcus is difficult, but don't make career decisions based on personal problems. Take a leave of absence. Get some perspective. My perspective is crystal clear, I said. I'm done working somewhere that promoted my husband's mistress while she was actively destroying my marriage. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. Elena, he said finally, I think you're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. After hanging up, I felt lighter than I had in months. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. This feeling of cutting ties, of choosing uncertainty over misery. Carmen knocked on the front door an hour later, carrying 2 bottles of wine and a bag from our favorite Thai restaurant. I figured you might be hungry, she said, studying my face. You look different. Again. I quit my job. She nearly dropped the wine. You what? I resigned. Effective in 3 weeks. Elena, are you having some kind of breakdown? First you let Marcus walk away without a fight. Now you're throwing away your career. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing what I want to keep and what I want to leave behind. Carmen set the food on the kitchen counter, her movements sharp with agitation. And what exactly do you want to keep? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're burning your entire life to the ground. I poured wine into 2 glasses, considering her question. What did I want to keep? In my previous life, I'd been so focused on what I was losing that I'd never stopped to think about what I might gain. I want to keep my self-respect, I said finally. I want to keep my dignity. I want to wake up in the morning and not dread going to work because I might run into my ex-husband and his girlfriend in the elevator. But your career will survive. I'm good at what I do, Carmen. Family law isn't exactly a shrinking field. Carmen sat down across from me, her expression softening. I'm worried about you. This whole calm zen thing. It's not natural. You should be angry. You should be devastated. If only she knew how angry I'd been. How many nights I'd spent screaming into pillows. How many dishes I'd broken. How many times I'd fantasized about confronting Victoria in the most public, humiliating way possible. I'd lived through all of that rage and come out the other side. I was angry, I said quietly. For a long time. But anger is exhausting, and it doesn't change anything. So what's the plan? You're going to become a hermit. Live off your savings until they run out. I smiled, remembering something I'd forgotten until this moment. Do you remember what I wanted to do before I met Marcus? Before law school, Carmen frowned, thinking. You wanted to… Oh, the photography thing. I wanted to travel, document stories, show the world things it had never seen before. That was 15 years ago, Elena. You're not 22 anymore. I'm 35. I have money saved, and I have professional skills that translate to freelance work. I could do contract legal work to pay the bills and pursue photography on the side, or I could start my own practice, specializing in cases I actually care about. Carmen stared at me, as if I'd suggested joining the circus. You're serious about this? Dead serious. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Victoria made dinner. There's leftovers if you want them. I showed the message to Carmen, who made a disgusted sound. He's really going to pretend this is all normal, isn't he? Like you're just roommates who decided to live separately. I deleted the message without responding. He's trying to manage the guilt. If he can convince himself that I'm fine with this arrangement, he doesn't have to face what he's actually done. And you're just going to let him. I'm going to let him do whatever he needs to do to sleep at night. It's not my job to manage his emotions anymore. Carmen opened one of the wine bottles and filled our glasses to the brim. Okay, I need to understand something. 3 months ago, you were completely devastated when you found out about the affair. You called me crying every night for weeks. Now Marcus actually leaves, moves his mistress into your house, and you're talking about career changes and photography. What happened? I took a long sip of wine, buying time. How could I explain that I'd already lived through the worst of it, that I'd spent 2 months in therapy, learning to recognize the signs I'd missed? understanding how I'd enabled my own misery by refusing to set boundaries. I got tired of being a victim, I said instead. I realized that as long as I kept fighting for something that was already over, I was giving Marcus all the power. He got to have his wife and his girlfriend, while I got to have nothing but humiliation. But don't you want him to pay for what he did? I thought about that. In my previous life, I'd been consumed with the need for justice, for acknowledgement, for some kind of cosmic revenge. I'd wanted Marcus to suffer the way I'd suffered. I'd wanted Victoria to lose her job, her reputation, her shiny new relationship. He will pay, I said quietly, just not in the way I used to think he should. Carmen raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Marcus is 43 years old. He just blew up a 12-year marriage for a woman who's young enough to be his daughter. A woman who's ambitious, beautiful, and smart enough to know exactly what she's doing. And he's about to learn the difference between an affair and a relationship, between someone who wants you because you're forbidden, and someone who wants you because you're available. Carmen's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You think Victoria will leave him? I think Victoria got what she wanted. A promotion, financial security, and the thrill of winning. Now she has to actually live with a middle-aged man who betrayed his wife for her. The excitement of being the other woman is gone. How can you be so sure? I smiled, remembering things I technically shouldn't know yet. Victoria's credit card debt, her dating profile was still active. The way she'd looked right through Marcus at the office Christmas party, already scanning the room for her next opportunity. Call it intuition, I said. We ate dinner mostly in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. As the evening wore on, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't planning my life around someone else's needs or expectations. I wasn't calculating how my decisions would affect Marcus's mood or career or reputation. I should go, Carmen said around 10 o'clock, but I'm staying in town this weekend. If you need anything. I know, thank you. After she left, I walked through the house one more time, turning off lights and checking locks. Tomorrow I would meet with Jennifer Walsh and begin the legal process of untangling 12 years of shared assets and obligations. Next week I will start cleaning out my office and preparing case files for transfer. But tonight, I was simply a woman alone in her house, making decisions for herself for the first time in over a decade. I poured another glass of wine and opened my laptop, scrolling through photography websites and travel blogs. There was a whole world out there beyond suburban Atlanta, beyond corporate law, beyond the suffocating routine of a marriage that had died years before anyone bothered to bury it. My phone rang one last time. Marcus again. This time I answered. What do you want, Marcus? I just wanted to make sure you're okay. You seem so calm about everything. I am calm. That's what worries me. Elena, I know you're angry. I'm not angry anymore. Then what are you? I looked around the house that would soon be his problem, thought about the job I'd just quit, considered the uncertain but exciting future stretching ahead of me. I'm free, I said, and hung up. 6 weeks later I stood in the lobby of Morrison & Associates, a boutique family law firm in downtown Seattle. The interview had gone better than expected, and Patricia Morrison herself had walked me to the elevator. We'll make our decision by Friday, she said, shaking my hand. But I have to say, your approach to collaborative divorce is exactly what our clients need. Too many attorneys see every case as a battle to be won. I smiled, thinking of all the battles I'd chosen not to fight. Sometimes the best victory is knowing when to walk away. The October air was crisp as I walked to my car, my phone buzzing with messages I'd been ignoring all morning. 3 from Carmen, asking about the interview, 2 from Jennifer Walsh, updating me on the divorce proceedings, and 7 from Marcus. I moved to Seattle 2 weeks ago, renting a small apartment near Pike Place Market with a view of Elliott Bay. The space was a third the size of the house I'd shared with Marcus, but every inch of it belonged to me. I'd furnished it with pieces I actually liked, bright colors, soft textures, artwork that made me smile instead of impressing guests I never wanted to see. The transition had been smoother than anyone expected, including me. The house sale had closed quickly. Marcus needed my signature to refinance it in his name alone, and I'd signed without negotiation. My former colleagues had thrown me a farewell party that felt more like a celebration than a goodbye. Even Richard Harrison had wished me well, though he'd made sure to mention that my old position would be waiting if I came to my senses. I wouldn't be coming to my senses. For the first time in years I was living sensibly. My phone rang as I reached my car. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and something in my chest tightened. In my previous life our final conversation had been devastating, angry, bitter, full of accusations and regrets. This time I was curious to see how different it might be. "Hello, Marcus." "Elena, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days." His voice sounded different, strained. There was an edge of desperation I hadn't heard since the night he'd confessed to the affair. "I've been busy. What do you need?" Can we talk in person? I'm willing to fly to Seattle." I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat, genuinely surprised. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I think I made a mistake, a huge mistake." There it was, the moment I'd dreamed of in my previous life, when I was still naive enough to believe that admitting a mistake was the same as fixing it. Now it felt like watching a movie I'd already seen. Interesting, but not particularly compelling. "What kind of mistake?" I asked, though I already knew. "Victoria and I, things aren't working out the way I thought they would." I pulled out of the parking garage and into Seattle traffic, phone balanced against my ear. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you, really?" The question caught me off guard. Was I sorry? In my previous life I would have been devastated to learn that Marcus was unhappy. I would have taken his pain as my own, felt responsible for somehow fixing it. Now I felt something closer to sympathy for a stranger. "I'm sorry that you're hurting," I said carefully. "I don't wish pain on you, Marcus, but I'm not responsible for your choices or their consequences." "Elena, I know how this sounds, but I think we should talk about trying again. We were good together for a long time. We could be good again." I stopped at a red light and caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me had shorter hair. I'd cut it the day after he moved out, and wore makeup I'd chosen for myself instead of colors that complemented his preferences. She looked older than 35, but also somehow younger, more alive. "Marcus, do you remember our last anniversary dinner?" "Of course, we went to Giovanni's. You wore that blue dress I liked." "Do you remember what we talked about?" There was a pause. "We talked about normal things. Work, vacation plans." "We talked about work for 45 minutes. Your cases, your clients, your goals for making a senior partner. I told you about the Hendricks custody case I was working on, and you changed the subject to ask if I'd remembered to schedule maintenance for your car." "Elena, we sat in that restaurant for 2 hours, and you never once asked me how I was feeling, what I wanted, what made me happy or sad or excited about the future. You talked at me, not to me." And I sat there smiling and nodding, because that's what I thought love was supposed to look like. The light turned green, and I drove toward the waterfront, where I'd planned to walk before heading home. "That's not fair," Marcus said. "I cared about you. I still care about you. I know you do, but caring about someone and loving them aren't the same thing. Loving someone means seeing them as a complete person with their own needs and dreams. Caring about someone can be as simple as wanting them to continue existing in your life, because they make it more comfortable. So that's it? 12 years, and you're just done." I parked near the pier, and watched seagulls dive for scraps from a food truck. "I was done long before you moved out, Marcus. I just didn't have the courage to admit it. But we could fix this. We could go to counseling, work on communication." "We could," I agreed, "if we both wanted to. But I don't want to fix something that was broken from the beginning." The silence stretched between us. In the background I could hear music, something classical that Victoria probably chose. She had expensive tastes in everything: art, wine, men who could provide the lifestyle she felt she deserved. "Is there someone else?" Marcus asked finally. The question amused me. "No, Marcus, there's just me. For the first time in 12 years, there's just me, and that's exactly how I want it. I don't understand you anymore. You never understood me." That was the problem. I hung up and sat in my car for a moment, processing the conversation. In my previous life, that call would have sent me spiraling. I would have spent hours analyzing every word, looking for hidden meanings, hoping for signs that he still loved me. Now it felt like closing a book I'd already read. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Elena, this is Victoria. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, remembering the last time Victoria had contacted me directly. In my previous life, it had been to gloat, to make sure I understood that she'd won. This time felt different. "What about?" I typed back, "Marcus, and some things you should know." Against my better judgment, I found myself curious. "I'm listening." "Not over text. Can we meet? I'm flying to Seattle tomorrow." I laughed out loud in my empty car. Victoria Chen, flying across the country to have a conversation with the woman whose husband she'd stolen. The irony was too rich to pass up. Coffee at Pike Place Market, 2 p.m., the original Starbucks. "Thank you." That night, I called Carmen to tell her about both conversations. "Wait, let me get this straight," my sister said. "Marcus wants you back, and his girlfriend wants to meet you in person." That's the summary. "Yes, and you're actually going to meet with her." I'm curious. In my previous, I caught myself. I've never heard her side of the story. Her side of the story is that she's a home-wrecking opportunist who seduced a married man for career advancement. Maybe there's more to it. Carmen sighed. "You're being too generous, but then again, you've been too generous about everything lately. It's like you're a completely different person." If only she. The next afternoon, I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early and secured a table near the window. Victoria appeared exactly on time, looking less polished than I remembered. Her designer suit was wrinkled from travel. Her usually perfect makeup showed signs of stress, and there were dark circles under her eyes that the concealer couldn't quite hide. She ordered a black coffee and sat across from me without preamble. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said. "I have to admit, I'm curious about what could be so important that you'd fly across the country." Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee cup and stared into it for a moment. "I need to tell you something about Marcus, something you deserve to know." "I already know about the affair, Victoria." "No, you don't." "Not really." She looked up at me, and I was surprised to see something that looked like shame in her eyes. "The affair started before I even knew you existed." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Marcus told me he was divorced. For the first 3 months we were together, I genuinely believed he was a single man. He showed me an apartment downtown and said it was his place. When I started asking to meet his friends, to go to work events together, he said he preferred to keep his personal and professional lives separate." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "When did you find out?" "Jennifer Walsh's birthday party last year. You were there, and someone introduced you as Marcus's wife." I confronted him that night, and he fed me this story about how you two were separated, but still living together for financial reasons. He said you were dating other people, that it was just a matter of time before you made it official. I remembered that party. Marcus had been distant all evening, claiming he had a headache. I'd driven home alone while he stayed to network with potential clients. "Why didn't you leave him then?" Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Because I was 26 years old and stupid enough to believe that a man who would lie to his wife wouldn't lie to me. He kept promising that he would tell you about us, that he just needed to find the right time. He said you were fragile, that you'd been through some difficult family stuff, and he was trying to protect you. That's not true. My family is fine. I know that now, but at the time, I thought I was being compassionate, patient, noble, even." She shook her head. "God, I was an idiot." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or deception, but Victoria looked genuinely disgusted with herself. "So what changed?" I asked. "You did, the way you handled him leaving. It was nothing like what he'd told me to expect. He said you'd be devastated, that you'd probably have a breakdown, that I should be prepared for you to make scenes at work or show up at the house. Instead you were calm, professional. You signed the papers without a fight, resigned from the firm without drama, and moved across the country like it was just another business decision. And that surprised you. It made me realize that Marcus had been lying about you just as much as he'd been lying to you. A fragile, unstable woman doesn't handle a divorce with that kind of grace. A fragile, unstable woman doesn't just disappear and start over." Victoria took a sip of her coffee and grimaced. "I started paying attention to the things he said about you, really listening. and I realized that he didn't actually know you at all. He had this image of who you were supposed to be, the grateful wife, the supportive partner, the woman who would always be there no matter how badly he treated her. When you didn't fall apart, it broke his entire world. Is that why you're here, to tell me that Marcus doesn't know me? I'm here to tell you that he's been calling you because he's panicking, not because he loves you, or misses you, but because your reaction scared him. He expected you to fight for him, to prove that he was worth fighting for. When you didn't, it forced him to confront the possibility that maybe he wasn't worth fighting for. I felt a strange sort of vindication. In my previous life, I had fought for him. I begged and pleaded, and made a fool of myself, trying to win back a man who'd already checked out of our marriage. This time, my silence had been more powerful than any argument. What about you? I asked. Are you fighting for him? Victoria's smile was rueful. That's the other thing I came to tell you. I'm leaving him. I already found another job, in Portland. I start next month. Because you feel guilty, because I finally see him clearly. Marcus Rodriguez is a man who lies to everyone in his life, including himself. He's selfish, manipulative, and cowardly. He'll never be happy because he doesn't actually want a partner. He wants an odd. She stood up, leaving her coffee mostly untouched. I wanted to apologize, she said. Not just for the affair but for believing his lies about you. You deserve better than both of us. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, watching tourists take pictures and street musicians perform for tips. My phone rang twice. Marcus again, but I let it go to voicemail. That evening, I walked along the waterfront as the sun set over Puget Sound. Seattle was beautiful in a way that Atlanta never had been for me. The mountains, the water, the evergreen trees that stayed green all year. It felt like possibility made manifest. My phone buzzed with one final text from Marcus. Victoria told me she saw you. We need to talk. I typed back, no, we don't. Have a good life, Marcus. Then I blocked his number. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new office at Morrison & Associates, reviewing a case file, when Carmen called. You'll never guess who I ran into at the grocery store, she said without preamble. Marcus, he looked terrible. Elena, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He asked about you. What did you tell him? That you were doing well, that you seemed happy, that you'd started your own photography business on the side, and were already booking clients. It was true. The collaborative law work paid the bills, but photography fed my soul. Last weekend, I shot a wedding for a couple who'd met after they'd both survived difficult divorces. Their joy had been infectious, their gratitude genuine. How did he react? He asked if you were seeing anyone. When I said no, he got this hopeful look on his face. So I told him you weren't seeing anyone, because you didn't want to, not because you were waiting for him to come back. I laughed. Carmen, you're evil. I'm protective. There's a difference. She paused. Are you happy, Elena? Really happy? I looked around my office, decorated with photographs I'd taken during weekend trips around the Pacific Northwest. Mountains reflected in alpine lakes, old-growth forests shrouded in mist, city skylines at dawn. Each image represented a moment I'd chosen for myself, a place I'd gone because I wanted to be there. I'm happy, I said, and meant it completely. Good, because you deserve to be. After we hung up, I pulled up the photos from my most recent shoot, a family reunion, where 3 generations had gathered to celebrate a grandmother's 90th birthday. The images captured something I'd been thinking about a lot lately, the difference between love and attachment. I'd been attached to Marcus, to our life together, to the idea of who I thought I was supposed to be, but love, real love, required seeing someone clearly and choosing them anyway. It required honesty, respect, and the courage to let go when necessary. Marcus had never loved me, and I'd never loved him. We'd been attached to each other, comfortable with the familiar patterns we'd created, but comfort isn't love, and familiarity isn't intimacy. As the afternoon faded into evening, I packed up my things, and headed home to my small apartment with its view of the bay. Tomorrow I had a case conference with a couple who wanted to divorce amicably for the sake of their children. Next weekend, I was driving to the Olympic Peninsula, to photograph old-growth forests for a conservation project. My life was smaller now in some ways. Smaller house, smaller bank account, smaller social circle, but it was also bigger in the ways that matter. Bigger dreams, bigger possibilities, bigger sense of self, and for the first time in over a decade, I was living it entirely for myself. 6 months after that, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Marcus was marrying someone new, a paralegal from the firm named Sarah Chen, Victoria's younger sister. The irony was so perfect I had to laugh. I threw the invitation away without RSVPing, then drove to my favorite hiking trail to photograph the spring wildflower. By the time I returned home, I'd forgotten all about it. Some stories end with dramatic confrontations, or grand gestures of revenge. This one ended with something much more powerful, indifference, and that I realized was the ultimate victory. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest upload.